Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight for the first debate of Leadership 2022. I'm Mazar Tang, and I'll be your debate moderator for this evening. Tonight is an opportunity for us to hear from the 6 leadership hopefuls, to hear their ideas, and to get an understanding of how each candidate will help shape the future of the BC Liberal Party. Before we begin, we would like to take a moment to recognize that we are on the ancestral and unceded homelands of the Halkidimi and Squamish-speaking peoples. We would like to extend our appreciation for the opportunity to hold a meeting on this territory. Finally, we are grateful for all of you who have chosen to spend your evening with us. Without further ado, we'll start things off with a quick video.
Hello, everyone. I am very pleased to join you tonight for the first of our BC Liberal Party Leadership 2022 debates. I want to recognize that I am watching with you tonight from the traditional territory of the Lheidli First Nation. I know that there are many of you joining us virtually from all across the province as the 6 candidates seeking election as the leader of the BC Liberal Party will share their vision and path forward for our party. This is an exciting opportunity for you to hear directly from the candidates, and ultimately, you will be able to participate in the choice of our new leader. I know that all of you will join me as we wish the candidates the best of luck in tonight's debate and throughout the entire leadership campaign. It has been an incredible honor to serve as the interim leader of the BC Liberal Party. And I want you to know that the BC Liberal caucus team have been working hard to hold the government to account, and we've had numerous successes. We will continue to work hard for you and all British Columbians. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And now, let the debate begin.
A big thank you to Shirley Bond, the BC Liberal caucus leader. All right, let's kick things off. Each of the candidates have been briefed on the rules for tonight's debate. They do not know the questions. The format for this debate will include 60-second opening statements, followed by each candidate responding to a series of questions submitted directly from voters from across the province. The questions have been reviewed by myself and from a neutral advisory committee. Halfway through the debate, each candidate will also have the opportunity to ask another candidate a question. At the end of the debate, candidates will deliver their closing statements. Speaking order and stage position was selected by random draw. Viewers and candidates will be able to see a live timer. Microphones will be cut off following the completion of the countdown clock, and we will be strict with that. I want to wish the candidates the best of luck. Now it's time to meet them. Michael Lee, Ellis Ross, Kevin Falcon, Renee Merrifield, Val Litwin, and Gavin Dew. Let's get started with the opening remarks. Each candidate will have 60 seconds. Michael Lee, the floor is yours.
I'm running for leader because I provide the best opportunity among this great group of candidates to win back our election in the next coming election. Over the past 5 elections, we've lost over 40% of our total vote share. We've made inconsistent and half-hearted efforts to broaden our appeal, and the results speak for themselves. Too many voters across BC have lost faith in us. This time, we have to go far beyond just broadening our appeal. We now have to fundamentally rebuild trust and accountability with voters and our party. If the public doesn't trust us, they'll never share our values or listen to our ideas to repair damage caused by the Horgan government. Simple rebranding won't work. Our challenge is more fundamental. Bragging about the bridges we've built in the past won't attract today's voters. We need to be focused on building new bridges to new and diverse voters all across this province. I'm best positioned to make that happen, and I hope to win your trust.
Thank you. Ellis Ross.
Thank you, and my name is Ellis Ross, and you may know me as one of the leaders that actually helped bring the largest private investment in Canadian history to Kitimat, the $40 billion LNG Canada project, which brought tens of thousands of jobs, contract opportunities, training opportunities, but also uplifted an entire generation out of poverty. But what you probably don't know is why I spent the better part of my 13 years doing it, and why I still continue to advocate for economic development. Because at the end of the day, I'm a family man. I'm a community man. I believe in people, and I believe in British Columbia. But you know what? From what I've heard from going all across BC and talking to people in Cranbrook and Fort St. John, out in Port Coquitlam and Abbotsford, the BC Liberals have failed to change with the times. We failed to acknowledge a demographic change. We failed to keep up with social media, for example. While I've done change before, personally, in terms of my views of economic development, I changed community views, I can do it again. And that's why I've always been presenting myself as the change candidate, because I beat the NDP in 2017 and 2020, and I can do it again, and I will do it again.
Thank you. Kevin Falcon.
In 2013, I retired from politics as Deputy Premier and Finance Minister to spend more time with my wife Jessica and our young children, and to serve as a senior executive in the private sector. You know, our BC Liberal government has a governing record we can be very proud of. You know, we got the big things right. Not everything, because no government ever does, but we got the big things right. And let's remember, whether it was reduced taxation, less red tape, environmental leadership, or the huge investments in roads, schools, and hospitals, that's what the public recognizes us for. But over the past decade, we also missed major opportunities to boldly address issues like low-cost childcare, housing affordability, mental health, and the environment. These are the things that the next leader must champion if we're to win back the seats in the Lower Mainland and on Vancouver Island. And I want to give as an example my old seat of Surrey-Cloverdale. That's now held by the NDP. I want it back. But to do that, we have to have a bold, optimistic vision for the future, built on principles, and recognizing that when we do big things, we will get big support. Thank you.
Thank you. Renee Merrifield.
Good evening. I am so excited to be here tonight, especially amongst an amazing group of candidates. But I'm worried. You see, the NDP are formidable, and we have to change in order to win against them in 2024. And make no mistake, we have to win in order to secure British Columbia's future and prosperity. But I'm hopeful, because tonight is the start of what could be a movement that will replace lifetime politicians like Horgan and give all British Columbians a better way forward. As leader, I will take us into that future, to new, fresh ideas, to a higher level of unity, greater diversity, a bolder position of strength and vision than we have ever seen before, all the while reclaiming the heart of the BC Liberal Party. Are you with me? Together we can build better belonging.
Thank you. Val Litwin.
We've all seen that pop-up window appear on our computer screen begging us to download the new operating system. And we all know what we do. We click Remind Me Later. This party has been pushed by changing attitudes, our own members, and the general public to download the new operating system for years now. But what do we keep doing? We click Remind Me Later. We're a proud party with a phenomenal history, but today, out of date and behind the times. We need to update the operating system right now. Will we appeal to the end user in 2024? Businesses, it's not a guarantee they love us anymore. Women, this party was largely built by men for men. We need to download the new mindset. And youth, they're just not seeing their values reflected in our party right now. Ask yourself during tonight's debate, do you see the candidates clicking ignore, update, or worse? Are they running on the old operating system? I'm ready to upgrade, and I think you are too.
Thank you. Gavin Dew.
We're all ready to say change, but saying the word over and over and over again without actually changing anything won't fool British Columbians. We can't move forward unless we leave the past in the past where it belongs. We need a new leader that we can trust to lead our party forward with real change. I'm committed. I've run campaigns, I've run for this party, and I've been building up the next generation of leaders for 15 years. I've built companies and helped unlock billions in capital projects across Canada to create thousands of jobs supporting people and families. The day I become leader, people will see our party differently. They will know we are done moping, they will know we are done clinging to the past, and they will know we are ready to move forward and win. Thank you.
Thank you. Our first question is from Baljinder from Surrey.
As a result of the last BC provincial election, the BC Liberal Party needs to reinvent itself. How will you, as leader of the party, rebuild it?
Excellent question. Ellis Ross, floor is yours.
Oh, well, thank you, Baljinder Sandhu from Surrey. And you know what? British Columbians have told us that we need to change as a party. But what's really troubling, what I've heard across Richmond, for example, is how they don't like us as a party because they think we've ignored them. This is what I've heard in Maple Ridge. This is what I've heard in Fort St. John, the Tri-City areas. They all say the same thing. We ignored the changing demographics. But what's most troubling? My own daughter, 2 weeks before the last provincial election, said that she does not support my party. She supports me, but she really felt disrespected by my party. She knew what my attitude was toward women. I always mentored women, encouraged women, I always actually got them into leadership positions. But she just didn't support my party. This perception's out there. We've got to change this perception. And for this, we've got to change. We have to change as a party. It can't be just a name change. It's got to be fundamental change. And we got to go back to listening. That is where the BC Liberals got their start. That's where I propose to bring them back to. Go back to listening.
Thank you. Kevin Falcon.
Look, we need to be a big tent party again. We need to make sure we attract women, young people, diverse candidates, and membership, because we want to make sure that we reflect the communities we hope to represent. That's how we're going to make our party strong again. By people united behind our principles, because when we stand for something, we give people a reason to get behind us. And that's how we're going to attract more women, more young people, more diverse candidates and members. That's how we're going to win back government. It's about leadership, it's about standing for something, and it's about making sure that we are a big tent that welcomes all.
Thank you. Renee Merrifield.
Every voter asks, do you see me? And every candidate needs to see them. We're a diverse province with different races, religions, sexes, backgrounds, histories, orientations, identifications, ages. But we are all British Columbians, and we all belong. So how do we get there? Well, right now, the NDP have a better picture on the surface, but really it's just lifelong politicians at the helm without diversity. If we get this right, we will win, because every resident in BC will be able to see themselves in us, because we will have the best candidates reflecting the diversity of our province. And ultimately, because this diverse team will carry the voices of their communities. I've lived this. I've been that young female in a male-dominated industry for the last 20 years, and I can be that positive change.
Thank you. Val Litwin.
Baljinder, thanks for the $1 million question. It's a great one. If someone new and if someone different is elected to lead this party next year, British Columbia will know this party has renewed. But that's just the start. The leader and their team are going to have to speak now to what is on the minds of the electorate here in British Columbia. And what is the electorate looking for? They're looking for someone who can catalyze change, and that's what I've done my whole career. Just out of university, I started a social movement that spread across Canada, committed to building social capital in communities across Canada. And then I co-founded a business with 2 inspiring female business partners that we grew across Canada into the US and overseas, because no one had ever done it before. It caught on like wildfire. And at the BC Chamber of Commerce, I set up a system with my team that allowed our 36,000 members around the province to speak in real time to Victoria and Ottawa around the ideas and issues that were keeping them up at night. We need a leader that can drive change, and I can do that.
Thank you. Gavin Dew.
Baljinder, it's 2021. Netflix just won 7 Oscars. We can't be digging in the discount bin at Blockbuster looking for our renewal story. We need to move forward. We're all saying the right things, but it comes down to a leader whose baggage from the past won't overshadow our future. I have more experience doing the work of renewal than anyone on this stage. I started my career at UBC running mentorship and leadership programs for young alumni. I've been bringing the next generation into our party since 2009. I started the Forum for Millennial Leadership to build up the next generation of political talent. I've built a campaign and a campaign team that looks like the future of our party. So if you want real renewal, vote for the guy who's already been doing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael Lee.
Well, thank you, Baljinder, for your question. I stand here on this stage as one of only 5 MLAs out of 28 ridings in Vancouver, Burnaby, Surrey, and Richmond. So I understand your concern. In order to regain government, we have to win back our ground in the Lower Mainland. And to do that, we have to broaden our appeal, as I've said in my last leadership run. But we have to do more than that. It's fundamental change we have to do now. We have lost trust with British Columbians and so many other members of our party and supporters around British Columbia. But more importantly, I put forward a plan to renew this party, to take steps to be a more inclusive party, based on 5 key values: accountability, compassion, community, integrity, and inclusivity. We need to be a values-based organization to open and be more broader, to be more accepting and welcoming of people of all backgrounds, regardless of their sexual orientation, their gender, their age, their ethnicity, or their religion.
Thank you. My second question is 2 parts. To date, the NDP government has continued with the philosophy of taxation to make housing more affordable, whether it's the empty home tax or the foreign buyers tax. It's clear that none of these policies have worked. In fact, British Columbians have seen price increases 13% year over year. First, how do you plan on addressing the supply issue, which is driving prices? And second, would you consider taking housing decisions away from municipalities to address the housing crisis? Kevin Falcon.
Well, you're exactly right, Maz. The fact of the matter is the NDP haven't got a clue what they're doing. They added a whole blizzard of new taxes on the housing sector, and 3 years later, how many people out there think housing got more affordable? Of course it didn't. That's not the answer. 25% of the cost of any new home today is made up of government fees, taxes, public art charges, property transfer tax. I could go through the list. The reality is we need 2 things. We need to work with the private sector to flood the zone. We need more rental. We need more affordable. We need more condos, townhouses, you name it. We've got to get more supply into the market. Secondly, we can't let local government off the hook. They are a big part of the problem. And I can tell you this, I'll make sure that local government is going to do their bit and that we get timely approvals so that we get product into the marketplace, so that we offer young people and first-time buyers a real opportunity to get into the housing market, because that's what we need. And it would be nice, I think it would be great, to have a premier who actually comes from a background that actually understands housing and the housing industry, and that's exactly what I bring to the table.
Thank you. Renee Merrifield.
Well, I'm really glad that we want a premier from the housing industry. And I would agree that we don't have a housing affordability issue, but a housing supply issue. Canada is the lowest per capita in the G7 in supply of housing. That's lower than the UK. And it's not just about supply of houses. It's about supply of materials, supply of labor, and supply of land that also contribute to the lack of affordability. And then there are the costs and red tape that are layered on by municipalities that do increase the costs of all housing. I do have a plan to end the housing affordability crisis once and for all, tackle unnecessary costs, partner with municipalities, increase speed to market, increase housing zoning, incent local suppliers and manufacturers, and get people into the housing options they need. I know that as leader, I can fix the affordability crisis to make sure young British Columbians have the options and the access to housing that they need.
Thank you. Val Litwin.
Everyone in BC deserves dignified housing, but if our young people can't afford to live here, BC doesn't have a future. Our modern economic and social issues, we understand they're all connected now. Housing is about economic growth, inclusive communities, and how we perform on our carbon emissions. But here's the problem. We're leaving one of the most important tasks in our civil, inclusive society to a level of government that is set up to fail. Municipalities have almost all the power around making decisions around housing, and I think that is a provincial responsibility. So my vision for BC is for the province to step into that responsibility. We can do better with local governments, and it doesn't have to be with a heavy hand, but let's resource them to fix backlog approvals. Let's tie infrastructure investments to housing requirements, and let's get the density zoning right so we can build some more homes. We need to get cracking. This isn't a Vancouver problem. It's a problem for BC.
Thank you. Gavin Dew.
I'm happy to get in the weeds of housing policy. It's incredibly complex and interconnected. But as a party, I think we need to start somewhere more spiritual. We need to start with empathy and start with making it clear that we are on the side of the strivers, that we're on the side of the people and families that want housing. We need to restore the dream of BC. That means work hard, play by the rules, and get ahead, get a home. Not work hard, play by the rules, and watch others get ahead, some of them by cheating. People are watching the dream slip through their fingers, and it feels like the rungs of the ladder are broken or out of reach. I've felt that way. We have to show people that we are on their side. If we can't do that, we can have the best damn housing policies in the world, and we'll still never win an election.
Thank you. Michael Lee.
Well, my son is renting in Vancouver, and he's been renting in the second location now. And like many of his friends, they're despairing in terms of how long it's going to take. A, to find affordable rental housing, but B, in terms of home ownership, that dream that's far away. So we have to do better. The NDP has not fixed housing, despite their promises. And quite frankly, the previous BC Liberal government had some challenges as well. But we have to do better. We can't just tinker around the edges. We have to look at the whole supply continuum. And I know when I represent the riding of Vancouver-Langara, we have the Canada Line running right through the middle of it. And when I became first elected, there were 24 luxury condominium projects being built on that Canada Line. When we put transportation, healthcare, and education dollars into a community, we need to ensure that we're building the right mix of family and rental and other high-density housing, particularly around transit lines. And that's not what's happening on the Broadway subway either.
Thank you. Ellis Ross.
Thank you very much. And you know what? It's obvious that supply is the question, and that's the answer. That's the problem. But yet, we've known about this problem for decades, and no one's been able to solve it. And this is why I actually changed my approach to economic development in the first place, because I was tired of the talk. We keep hearing the same old talk. Well, I'm not a talker. I'm a doer. That is why we saw so much success in Kitimat. That's a difference between leadership and politics. And in terms of the affordability of houses, I think that's the key phrase, affordability. Housing prices have gone up. Inflation has gone up. Everything's gone up in terms of the cost, especially for our young people. Wages have not. Even the financial experts that we hear about on the radio and TV are saying the same thing. This has got to be across the board in terms of how we address housing in Vancouver, Vancouver Island, up in rural BC, all over BC. And right, I've got the political will to do it. I proved it before, I'll do it again.
Thank you. Gavin Dew.
Michael, you touched on transit-oriented development. That's certainly close to my heart. I've worked on transit-oriented development projects before. In my view, it's an insult to taxpayers all over British Columbia and Canada if their taxpayer dollars are invested in rapid transit, only to see single-family housing sitting across the street 10 or 20 or 25 years later. So what specifically would you do in order to make sure that transit-oriented development gets built in an expedient way?
Thank you, Michael Lee. You have one minute to respond.
This is all connected. Provincial governments need to take more leadership. We need to tie more strings to how those public taxpayer dollars are going into our communities. We need to ensure we are building that right level of density. So I mentioned at the end of my previous comments, the Broadway Subway Project, $2.8 billion of our taxpayer dollars to build a 5.7 kilometer run, 6 stations. One station has 6 stories currently being zoned for it. They're having a special zoning application now. But this is where we should have an integrated plan, both with the city government of Vancouver and the BC government. We shouldn't be putting dollars into play here into our community without those assurances, without a plan for how we're going to meet the housing challenges of Metro Vancouver, when we see, of course, over 1 million people expected to be coming and living in this Metro Vancouver area by 2050.
Thank you. Our third question is from Sean from Fort St. John.
Despite the unanimous adoption of UNDRIP by the legislature in 2020, many Indigenous communities still face serious inequities, and it remains unclear who has the final say on many natural resource projects as well as land use decisions in BC. As Premier, how would you advance reconciliation and fairness for all residents of British Columbia?
Excellent question. Let's start this round off with Renee Merrifield.
Well, I've partnered with Indigenous people for over 20 years, building relationships, building economic growth, understanding the culture, and supporting the sustainability of Indigenous people's futures. Right now, Indigenous people are lower on almost all indicators: health, education, supports, housing, almost across the board. Reconciliation for me is about partnering. It's about relationship. It's about building trust, all with the desire to move forward together. It's a conversation, not just lip service, and it's activation and making things work rather than just one size fits all. And that includes our energy and resource projects. Now, I'm going to rely on my caucus members like Ellis, who have incredible insight into these issues, but also on my own learnings over the course of the last 2 decades in partnering with these communities. It's time to move these indicators in the right directions.
Thank you. Val Litwin.
Sean, thanks for the question, and can't wait to get up to Fort St. John. Our Indigenous communities want and deserve to be healthy, to be successful, and to be proud. And the British Columbians I talk to, they want this too. But we can't talk about reconciliation as if we're re-engineering our economy here in BC to compete. We have to be prepared to engage and to follow. The Truth and Reconciliation Report has 94 calls to action. 28 of them are relevant to BC. I think those should be our guide. Those will be my guide. A Liberal Party under my leadership would place increased priority on prioritizing and empowering nations to do what I hear them asking for: to walk their healing path and to pursue economic opportunity. How we listen to Indigenous people in BC and how we partner with them will define our future success. Let's get more Indigenous voices at the table.
Thank you. Gavin Dew.
Canada is a great country. I'm proud to be Canadian, but that doesn't mean turning a blind eye to the sins of the past or the realities of the present. The last few years, we have all wrestled with growing awareness of things like residential schools and intergenerational trauma. We are at the end of an era of denial, but the question is, where do we go from here? I choose to believe that we are in the early days of an Indigenous renaissance, a new flourishing of cultural and economic opportunity and achievement by our Indigenous peoples. We need to embrace that as an opportunity, not fear it as a risk. In order to do that, we need to catch up with case law. We need to catch up with the business community. And we need to recognize that every band and every individual has different realities, different ideas, and different opportunities. We need to be their partner as we move forward together.
Thank you. Michael Lee.
Well, I'm running for leader of this party to repair the trust relationship between British Columbians and government, including for Indigenous peoples. It is about reconciliation, but that trust relationship has been broken by this NDP government. When they adopted UNDRIP, Sean, they set expectations this high that they did not meet. It's been 2 years since they've made any progress on the action plan that was supposed to implement UNDRIP. But we know, as British Columbians, all of us, we need certainty. We need clarity. We need to work with each other. And I know that in terms of my history as a resource lawyer working with many resource companies around this province, that partnership is there. The opportunities to build economic opportunity, to encourage and ensure that we follow the lead and hear the voices of Indigenous leaders. It's more than just being at the table. They need to be part of this process.
Thank you. Ellis Ross.
You know what? Reconciliation has become a buzzword, a politician's buzzword. You really want to talk about Indigenous issues? Talk about poverty, unemployment, exclusion, children in government care, and suicide. That's what I've been trying to resolve. This is why I joined the BC Liberal Party in the first place. Because contrary to what everybody believes, reconciliation has been happening in BC since 2004 under the BC Liberals. The BC Liberals have done more for First Nations in BC than any other political party in BC history. I might even add in Canadian history. Over 450 agreements were signed with First Nations. And I'm talking about revenue sharing agreements. I'm talking about environmental stewardship agreements. I'm talking about all kinds of agreements that actually allowed First Nations to do what they've always wanted. take a look at their self-determination issues on their own terms. That is what is actually going to drive the real issues being solved here in BC. I wanted to join the BC Party to actually help them progress in that file, and that's why I wanted to be the leader of this BC Party, because we can do much better.
Thank you. Kevin Falcon.
Look, I think we have to recognize that the relationship is a journey, and there's going to be bumps on the road, but we have to approach this journey with mutual respect and trying to make mutual wins. You know, there are lots of great First Nations leaders out there. I'm standing right next to one here. And what we have to do is identify, work, and support with those First Nation leaders, make sure that we create mutual benefits. Because I know that they're just as interested in ensuring that their young people can look forward to the same kind of bright future that we all expect for our young people. But that means, again, working together with mutual respect. I don't like the virtue signaling, quite frankly. I don't like all the, talking as if this is a special group and we have to look at. No, there are some great leaders and emerging leaders in that community. And like I say, I stand next to one right here. There are lots more out there, and we're going to work with them. And those that don't want to work with us, we'll take our time. It's a journey to continue to help bring them along and identify the opportunities by working together and how we can improve both their lives and the lives of all British Columbians.
Thank you. For this next section, each candidate will have the opportunity to ask any other candidate a question. The questioning candidate will have 30 seconds to ask a question. The answering candidate will have 1 minute to respond. The questioning candidate will have the option to follow up with a 1-minute response. If they do, the answering candidate is allocated 30 seconds. Michael Lee, you will ask first.
Rebuilding takes commitment, and I'm all in. People are asking you, Kevin, are you all in as well? You haven't stepped away from your day job with a downtown Vancouver property developer. You chose not to run in the BC election less than a year ago and are coming back only now because the leadership is up for grabs. Regardless of how this shapes up, I'm committed to our team and will run again and rebuild. How can party members trust that you're willing to put in the work to restore trust?
Kevin Falcon, you've got
Well,
1 minute.
that's very simple. They can look at my record. I'm proud of the fact that I have bled for this party. I have worked hard for this party. I'm proud of the fact that I've worked with some great people in this party to achieve great things. Many of us talked about some of the projects we touched on, whether it was the Canada Line, the Evergreen Line, the Cancer Centre in Prince George. These are all projects I had the honor to spearhead. And I want you to know this. This party requires, in spite of its great history, requires a reboot and a rebuild and a potential rebranding. I said that on the day I launched my campaign. But we must never forget that this party is strong because people like ourselves, including yourself, Michael, make a huge investment of time and effort in building up the grassroots of this party, making sure that we stand for something, making sure that we have a positive, inspiring vision for the future, which I do, and that's how we're all going to work together to make this a great BC Liberal Party, not just today, but in the future.
Michael Lee, do you wish to respond?
I do. And Kevin, look, you have done a great service to this province in your participation as a minister in so many important and valuable and impactful BC Liberal governments of the past. But it's been 10 years. You come back now talking about your record, and I appreciate that. It's something that we all are grateful for this province going forward. But it's about how do we move forward. It's about how do we affect change and how do we rebuild trust. And so this is going to take a lot of work. And as far as I can see, you have not left your property development firm. You are doing this arguably on the side of your desk. So I will ask you again, will you run in another leadership, if another leadership candidate wins this race, will you run in the next provincial election and support and be part of this team?
Kevin Falcon, you have 30 seconds.
Sure. Well, look, Michael, you haven't resigned as an MLA either, right? So look, let's just be serious about this. I've spent the last better part of a decade in the private sector in a senior role with not just a property development company, but Anthem Capital. I'm very proud of that. Been involved in the natural resource sector, sitting on boards that have to do with everything from craft brewery businesses to high technology businesses. And I'm very proud of that because, frankly, I don't know that we need professional politicians. Right now, we need somebody that has the experience both in the public sector, which I do as a senior leader, and also the private sector. That's what we need right now in this party.
Thank you. Ellis Ross.
Well, thank you, Maz. And you know what? I've got to follow up on that question. Because I don't expect Michael Lee to resign as an MLA. I expect him to stay here and put his name on the ballot. regardless of what happens here. I resigned as chief councillor to help the BC Liberals get more LNG projects across the finish line. So, my question is back to Kevin Falcon. If BC's future is so important to you, why weren't you on the ballot with the rest of us in 2017 or even 2020?
Kevin Falcon, you have a minute to respond.
Sure, that's very easy because I had two very young girls. And, you know, when I retired from public life, I announced my retirement in 2012. My eldest daughter was 2 years old at the time. My wife, Jessica, was pregnant with her youngest. And, you know, today those girls are now 11 and 8 years old. In 2017 and 2020, I felt that they were too young for me to abandon my family and go back into the public sector. So, you know, everyone makes their decisions around timing. And here's what's important. What's important is that I bring public sector experience in senior roles, finance, transportation, and not to mention reducing red tape. That's something that I think is unique on the people in front of the stage. And the other thing is private sector experience, because I think almost a decade in the private sector with a front row seat, seeing how incompetently local government handles things like, for example, housing supply, is going to be awfully helpful for us as we go forward, because we need a leader that's got private and public sector experience and a vision for the future of this province.
Ellis, you have a minute if you wish to respond.
Well, you know what? I have a family too, and I didn't abandon them to do this job. Michael Lee has a family. Renee has a family. Everybody on this panel here today has a family. That's what sacrifice means when you get into a leadership position. But it's easy to do this work in the best of times. It's really easy. I went through the darkest periods of my life trying to change my community's mindset towards LNG. The darkest periods of my life. I ended up going to court, but I put my name back on the ballot. And my people could see through that and see the principle I was standing for, and they elected me as chief councillor. They put me in by acclamation the next time around for chief councillor. I resigned from that job to win an NDP riding in 2017, in 2020, to help what I thought was a struggling BC Liberal government. In the worst of times, I've always stuck it out. And I've got family. My grandson was born at 6 p.m. on a Thursday night. I had to catch a plane 6:30 to get down to the legislature. So my question remains, Kevin Falcon, if BC's future is so important to you, why weren't you on the ballot with the rest of us in the last two previous elections?
Kevin Falcon, you have 30 seconds to respond.
Sure. Well, first of all, I think we'd be hard-pressed to say this is the best of times for the BC Liberal Party. It hardly is. If I was opportunistic, I would have run in 2017. That would have been a much better time to run for leader of the party, clearly, when we had an opportunity with the minority government to actually form government. This is probably one of the toughest times to run for leader of this party. And I'm not doing it because it's a great timing or the most propitious time to run for leader of this party. I'm doing it because I care a lot about this party. I don't want to see this party find itself in opposition or even oblivion in the future. I'm working to make sure we win and form government.
Thank you. Kevin Falcon, your question.
Okay, so I've got a question for Ellis. Ellis, I just, last night I saw your video celebrating the Canada Line and the Compass Card. Those are two initiatives that I brought in as minister and spearheaded as Minister of Transportation. And I appreciate your positive words about it because I think they're all true. My question for you is, what's your next priority for expanding rapid transit in the Lower Mainland?
Ellis Ross, you have a minute to respond.
Well, thank you for that, Kevin. And you know what? It's already happening. The lines are actually being spent right now from Broadway, over on Broadway Street, over to Arbutus. That's where, commercial on Broadway, that's where it's happening. But you know what? We've lost focus on what actually matters going outside of Vancouver and going into Vancouver. The gridlock going to the North Shore, for example. The Massey Tunnel. That could have been done. Why wasn't it done? Because the political will was not there. The traffic jams outside Abbotsford. I think there's more to what's happening in Vancouver than meets the eye. The people of Maple Ridge are actually tired of all the traffic jams going through their own community. So this is what the Lower Mainland needs, and this is not just for Lower Mainlanders. A lot of the people from all over BC depend on Highway 1 to get into Vancouver because we all enjoy getting there. So I think that we need a fresh new perspective on what it means and what the affordability issues are for Lower Mainlands and specifically Vancouver.
Kevin Falcon, you have a minute to respond if you wish.
Well, sure. I think, my response would be that we need to be more bold and more aggressive than that, to be candid. Right now we've got the SkyTrain going to Arbutus. That's not far enough. It should go right out to UBC. Let's be clear about this. We have to be building for the next generation. And we need SkyTrain over to the North Shore too. And we got to get moving on that along with the new bridge. And we need to make sure that that SkyTrain gets out to Langley. Well, we still see it happen in our lifetime. And as the only candidate up here that led the Canada Line and launched the Evergreen Line, I think it's important that we think about issues like that. So right now, Ellis, as you know, the terminus of the Broadway subway line is at Arbutus, and I'm just wondering what your thoughts are for moving that forward.
Ellis Ross, you have 30 seconds.
You know the issue with the transit down the Lower Mainland? It's political. There's no comprehensive long-term plan. And that's why Vancouverites are getting angry. Under my government, I would show out a stage plan, not over just the next election. It has to be over 4 years, 8 years, 12 years, 20 years, because the population is going to grow. The traffic's going to grow. People are trying to get in from Maple Ridge to Abbotsford. It's taken them over an hour and a half to 2 hours to get from Maple Ridge into North Shore for a job that can pay the mortgage. We need a fresh perspective. We need change. And that's why I'm the change candidate can actually make this happen.
Thank you. Renee Merrifield, your question.
Thanks so much. My question is going to be to Kevin, because both Michael and Ellis have attempted to ask the question but didn't get a straight answer. So I'm going to not mince words. In 2011, you promised to run again if you didn't win, but you broke that promise. So my question to you is threefold. Why didn't you run in the last election for a seat? Not for leadership, for a seat. Will you run if you don't win this leadership race? And if so, which riding?
You have a minute, Kevin Falcon.
Sure. So first of all, to be clear, just to correct one thing there, Renee, in 2011, I said I did not foreclose the opportunity of perhaps running again in the future, because I'm always very careful with what I say about things like that. But I want to be clear about this. I'm running to be the leader of the BC Liberal Party. And I'm running so I can be the next premier of the province, and we can elect a great team of candidates that are diverse and reflect the communities we want to represent. I'm not running just to be an MLA again. I'm running to be the leader of the BC Liberal Party, and I want people to really understand that very clearly, because I think it's important that we have clarity around that. And I'll tell you this, there will be nobody that will work harder, that will travel the province, that will spend time in living rooms, kitchens, church basements, making sure that we build up the grassroots of this party like we've done in the past, and ensure that we have people excited and we build a movement to ensure that we form government again in British Columbia, and I will be a big part of that effort.
You have a minute to follow up if you wish.
Thanks. Well, Kevin, unlike you, I did step aside from my operations and my company in order to jump into the boat when the waters were rushing in. And I started to bail, and bail hard, because as an MLA, that's what's most important. Maintaining the grassroots, maintaining the voice. And that's why we lost in 2017, and it's why we lost again in 2020, because we forgot who votes for us, and we forgot how to actually get that voice again. So while you might not see it being an MLA as an important task, I actually do. I actually see it as the most important. It's how we're going to attract other talent to that role, and it's how we're actually going to voice the communities across BC in a very diverse way. So I ask you again, will you run in the next election if you don't win leadership? Yes or no?
To be clear, no, I'm running to be leader of the BC Liberal Party. But the second thing I would say is this. Look, I've been an MLA. I know how important an MLA is. I served 12 years as an MLA. I served in senior cabinet portfolios, including finance, transportation, and healthcare. I know how important that role is. But I want to be clear about the fact I did not run in 2017 because my daughters then were 4 and 7. They were too young, and I didn't think it was the right time. Today, I think the party is in serious jeopardy. It's certainly not to my benefit to run it this time. It would have been in 2017. I'm doing it for the right reasons.
Thank you. Val Litwin, your question.
Thank you, Maz. Just for the record, I have 2 young boys under the age of 3. I was up at 3 a.m. last night. I have a feeling my good friend Gavin was as well. I'm in it as well. I'm ready to go the distance. So right now, Renee, we have 7 seats held by women in the legislature out of 28. I brought up in my opening how we need to download the new mindset to empower and bring women to this party. I'm asking you because I think we need some insight. You're the only woman on this stage. How do we attract and empower more women in this party?
Renee Merrifield, a minute.
Well, we don't just need to be more inclusive to women. We actually need to remove barriers for all British Columbians. Because what's called, bullying on a playground or chauvinism in a workplace is actually called politics in politics by lifetime politicians. We need a different way. We need a more welcoming environment to attract and draw the best individuals forward. And that environment, that culture, it starts at the top and is completely linked to the leader and to the shared values that are created throughout. Leadership, to create a culture of equality, whether you're old or new, male or female, young or aged, or regardless of your background or geography. It's really about creating a code of ethics and honor, and then enforcing it. Culture. Principles. We can have the best strategy, but culture trumps strategy every single time, and we've seen that.
Val, do you have a follow-up?
Thank you, Renee. I agree, and I just want to be clear with our party and everyone that's listening tonight. Women elect governments in Canada. When we lose sight of what women value, we lose the opportunity to form government. And it is far too simplistic to say women care about healthcare, education, and social issues more than men. Instead, we need to dig into how the issues of healthcare, other social issues, education, childcare impact women, because it is disproportionate. The pandemic is affecting women totally differently than men, and we have to pay attention to that. My belief is that women are BC's secret weapon. All my greatest leaders, mentors, and business partners, they've all been women. The data shows us, and I've experienced this, they build more resilient, more inclusive, and more profitable businesses. So to empower women and to work, we have to work to knock down barriers, to bring them into our party. And if we bring them into our party, we will win in 2024.
Thank you. Gavin Dew, your question.
Thanks. Kevin's forgotten what he said in 2011, but I'll read it out for you because I brought it. I've made a commitment to run in this election, win or lose. Whether I win or lose, I am going to be a candidate for this party, period. But he's not going to answer the question, so I'll move on to Ellis. Ellis, I'm always inspired by your stories of how the Heislog got out of poverty through the LNG opportunity. What's your approach to addressing rural communities that don't have the fortune to be so strategically located?
Ellis Ross, you have a minute.
Thanks, Gavin. And you know what? That happened many, many times. It actually is one of the few topics that nobody likes to talk about, reconciliation between First Nations and First Nations. That's what we achieved in our community. On a handshake, we actually allowed a band like Kit Cadla to come in and participate with contracts. We allowed a band to the north of us, Kitsillas First Nation, to get the contract for clearing for the pipeline right-of-way right through their territory and through our territory. And it was old-fashioned. Just get up, shake hands, and have witnesses. No lawyers, no consultants, because you know what I told all these leaders? We're all facing the same issues. If we're not united in this, and if we can't help each other, nobody can help us. The true way to get First Nations to independence is not through government. It hasn't happened in the last 40, 50 years. It's not going to happen in the next 40, 50 years. We took it upon ourselves up in northern areas from Prince George to Kitimat to do it ourselves, and we succeeded. And now it's in partnership with the BC Liberal government, with guys like John Rustad, Rich Coleman, Mary Polak, Shirley Bond. That is why I joined this party, because I'll say it again, the BC Liberal Party has done more for First Nations reconciliation than any other party in BC.
Thank you. Gavin Dew.
Thanks very much, Ellis. That's a great point. I've proposed the idea of an integrated ministry of rural communities that would work across government to address not only opportunities but also challenges in rural communities, whether that's deindustrialization, depopulation, the loss of jobs, the loss of hope, the mental health and addiction challenges that come with that. Because I believe we need an integrated approach to address the needs of rural communities, as well as we need to recognize the way in which our entire province knits together. People who are struggling with issues in rural British Columbia often end up in my old neighborhood in the downtown east side. We need to recognize the ways that fits together, and we need to take an integrated all-of-government approach. Ellis, I just wanted to ask you, what would be among your top priorities for an integrated ministry like that?
Ellis Ross, you have 30 seconds.
Well, I'd be more interested in something that's been proposed from Queen Charlotte Island to Kitimat, and that's the Revenue Benefit Alliance, something that the BC Liberals actually brought to the table, but just couldn't close the deal on. But I think we have to look at it in a different manner, because the revenues that we're actually talking about, they're gone. They're all gone in revenue on deficit finance payments. Their interest payments alone are going to be in the millions, if not billions of dollars. So I actually support the Revenue Benefit Alliance for all these communities, because they've got more costs and more problems than we've seen in the last 10 years.
Thank you for your questions. On to question 4. In the wake of the pandemic and thousands of businesses having to shut their doors, what is your plan to revitalize the economy and attract high-paying jobs? What will you specifically do to support small businesses? And we'll start with Val Litwin.
We need to learn to live with COVID, but we'll never recover if we don't get real. This means vaccinations, it means masks, it means distance, it means common sense, and sadly, we've been missing a little bit of the last thing in that list these days. My vision is that we are the party of science, of protection, of community, and making short-term sacrifices to ensure our long-term economic success. It's a no-brainer. And by the way, we're going to save some lives as we do it. All the sacrifices we're making now will help us get through this nightmare faster and begin the path to true recovery. Today's government actually doesn't have a recovery plan, and I should know I sat on the Premier's Economic Recovery Task Force, and in my humble opinion, the one thing we never talked about was economic recovery. A plan looks like a light-speed review of our tax system to support business to grow and compete, a commitment to cutting red tape, and fast-tracking incentives that drive productivity and wage growth so we can build back better and do better on our climate goals.
Thank you. Gavin Du.
To grow our economy, we need a leader who understands the economy hands-on, both our traditional sectors as well as the emerging sectors that are driving an increasing amount of our economic growth. I'm very proud of the work that I've done in our traditional sectors, like the resource sector, working to get major projects approved. I'm equally proud of the work that I've done in our tech sector and even in the regulated cannabis sector, which is an $8 billion industry that the NDP is getting wrong. It is critically important that we have the right policies, but it's also very important that we have a leader who can talk with fluency to the next generation of business leaders and the next sectors emerging in our economy. Because right now, those folks do not see themselves in our party. That is why it is so important that we have a digitally literate, new, modern leader who is focused on the future, not the past.
Thank you. Michael Lee.
I grew up in a family where my father owned and operated corner pharmacies on the east side of Vancouver, and I grew up working on weekends. Like so many British Columbians who want to build a stronger future here for their families, their children, their grandchildren, they're working 7 days a week. And what we need is a government that doesn't on the back of employers, people who make and create good-paying jobs and take care of the community. We've had that under this NDP government. That has to change. It's too high of a burden. We have to compete. We can't be shutting down the trade offices that were there in the Asia Pacific in December 2019. That's what this NDP government did. At a time where we need to continue to compete and have greater trade and investment in our province, they broke those relationships. We need to move forward to use the energy backbone of our province, the hydroelectric dam system, which is our strength, to continue to innovate in clean energy and technology. That is a strength for this province that we need to compete with.
Thank you. Ellis Ross.
Well, thank you. And you know what? This is what I did 14 years prior to becoming an MLA. This is what we did in terms of LNG. And we did it by balancing the economy with the environment. We brought peace in the woods by signing the first ever forest and range agreements with the BC Liberal government. That's what brought peace in the woods. But more importantly, it got to the point where why I do this job in the first place. It uplifted people. It got people into good-paying jobs where they could afford those mortgages in Kitimat and Terrace, or wherever they wanted to go. It actually built up skills. And I've always said this, you can't have a strong community without having strong people. And we've proved this in Kitimat. What would I do specifically? I'd reopen our trade offices in Asia, which the NDP have shut down. I'd actually open up trade relations with Africa, who want our lumber product. That's what a trade minister is supposed to do. I'd actually mend the relationships with the United States, who doesn't want to allow their cruise ships to stop in Victoria, Vancouver, or Prince Rupert, which is hurting our small businesses. That's what a tourism minister is supposed to do. That's what leadership is. That's what I've done before, and that's what change can bring, and that's why I'm running to be premier of this province.
Thank you. Kevin Falcon.
You know, BC is the envy of the world. We have unbelievable natural resources that, by the way, are going to be absolutely critical to fueling all the new electric cars and the wind turbines and all the things we're going to need to help the world transition to a post-fossil fuel economy, all right here in British Columbia. What we need is a government that understands how important it is that we ensure there's certainty so that we can get those mineral products into producing more of what the world needs. And we've got a great forest industry, for goodness sakes. And guess what one of the biggest trends is right now? It's building more wood-based buildings because it's much more environmentally sensible than it is to use concrete. And we've got a great technology sector. Young people driven by technology, green technology, that we can export around the world and create better outcomes. That's why I'm excited. We have a low-carbon economy, and we can be proud to export all our brains and talent around the world.
Thank you. Renee Merrifield.
Well, British Columbians need opportunity. And a strong economy gives them opportunity. And you can't have a strong economy without small and medium-sized businesses firing on all cylinders. They are the key to resilience, recovery, and innovation. But we've seen just the opposite happen. Instead, the NDP has created more hostile environment for business with reckless mismanagement and 2 credit downgrades. And then we have COVID, which has created the biggest divide between the haves and the have-nots, even in the business world. That's why I would focus as leader on creating a better environment for business through getting government out of the way, stimulating innovation, renewing areas in our province that require reinvention through thoughtful economic planning, through marrying industry with our research institutions and our next generation of entrepreneurs, and creating infrastructure that makes sense and enhances what we are able to do. A strong economy is the only way to sustain our beautiful BC.
Thank you. Our 5th question is from Jazz from Victoria.
With cases beginning to rise and our healthcare system under increased pressure, what do you believe is the best way to maximize the number of British Columbians vaccinated against COVID-19?
Gavin Dew, the floor is yours.
Too many families have lost loved ones too soon to COVID, and we all need to encourage people to get vaccinated. We also need to make sure healthcare workers have both the resources and the respect they need to keep carrying the burden day after day, especially in catchments like Northern Health. In this federal election, vaccine passports became a proxy for fears about government overreach. And I think that shows how critically important it is that we build trust to maximize the number of people who choose to get vaccinated. We need to be unafraid to keep asking tough questions and insisting on transparency, whether it's in long-term care, schools, hospitals, or homeless shelters. I called for a nonpartisan public inquiry into the handling of COVID 5 months ago, and I welcome my fellow candidates to join my call.
Thank you. Michael Lee.
It is a question of trust. I have put out as well a government accountability and integrity policy that talks about how do we restore trust with government. When we have our taxpayer dollars put to use, we need to ensure that government is held accountable. The way that data has been misutilized by this government, kept from the public, tinkered with, manipulated, is a real concern. It causes a lot of confusion, a lot of concerns by British Columbians. And we need to get people vaccinated in this province. We need to follow the science, but we need to take the politics out of this. When you mix politics over top of the science, you get confused messaging, and people lose trust and confidence in who we elect. It's one of the core reasons why I stood for government in the first place. We have an opportunity as a province to move forward with more compassion and more care for each other. So get vaccinated, please.
Thank you. Ellis Ross.
Oh, thank you. You know what? And people are angry out there. And mainly what they're angry about is the mixed messages coming from this NDP government. I mean, think about it. The NDP government asked us to do a number of things to actually flatten the curve, and we did it. We did as we were asked. And once that curve was flattened, they called a snap election. That was a message to people that were getting out of this, that it's okay to get out and vote again. They did it to us. This is the mixed messaging that's actually driving a lot of the anger we see today. And the bottom line is, you know what? I've got both vaccination shots. And I really encourage everybody to get it, because at the end of the day, I don't want to see anybody suffering. I don't want to see your family members suffering. I don't want to see your friends suffering. These stories that are coming out of these ICUs that are just plugged, and our nurses and our doctors are overworked and exhausted. We're going to have a crucial healthcare shortage if we're not careful. So ultimately, what I'd do as Premier, I'd be more transparent and accountable, just the same way I did 14 years prior to being MLA. I believe in being honest. I believe in telling the truth. And as that comes out with COVID, I believe in just getting that message back out to constituents.
Thank you. Kevin Falcon.
Well, as a former health minister, I think the first thing you do not do is what the current NDP government is doing. You don't manipulate the data. You don't try and hide information from parents worried about their kids in the school system. You don't try and hide that information so nobody knows and they have to set up their own Facebook pages to try and find out where kids are being vaccinated. That builds and breeds distrust. Real leadership is about, first of all, making sure you're double vaccinated, which I am, and I think everyone on the stage, I hope, is. But it's also about making sure we follow the science and the evidence. And it's also making sure we don't vilify those that are hesitant. It's important we share the information with them and try and encourage them to do the right thing. Because be clear, we have to ensure that those that aren't getting vaccinated get vaccinated. Because that's how we're going to ensure that we get this behind us and get on to building a future and a great economic story in British Columbia.
Thank you. Renee Merrifield.
Thanks. Vaccinations are about trust. They are about access, and they are about information. And as my colleagues have said here tonight, the NDP have failed. They failed on access, shutting down vaccination clinics on weekends in very low vaccination areas. They failed on information and in not getting the data out to those that need it the most. And they failed on trust and building trust. I once heard, well, just ask your GP about it. Not me, myself, I'm double vaccinated. But ask your GP. Well, we have a GP shortage. In fact, 800,000 British Columbians don't have a family doctor to just ask about vaccination. So we need to get serious about our entire healthcare system, about making sure that we have access to a GP when we need to ask that question about vaccination, and that we depoliticize this and not use it to divide, but rather unite us commonly.
Thank you. Val Litwin.
Jazz, it's a great question. Thank you for asking it. My wife is an ICU nurse. I used to be the vice president of operations for one of North America's largest home healthcare companies. I'm looking at this moment we're in. I'm looking at our friends in Alberta and Saskatchewan, and I am scared. We need the public to get vaccinated. So I was one of the first people to stand up in this larger party here to say, look, we need to support mandatory vaccinations for our healthcare workers, and I still stand beside that. Like I also said, we are the party of science and evidence, and we can't shrink back from that. But we have to understand there are people in the middle who are hesitant or scared because they've suffered discrimination in our healthcare system, because they are at a lower socioeconomic status and they can't get to a hospital or a clinic to get their injection. Or they're scared because vaccines that were on the shelf aren't anymore. So let's not insult and other those people. Let's keep them in conversation and pull them in, and let's get those people vaccinated.
Thank you. Our sixth question and last question. Parents with young children are struggling across this province to find affordable childcare. What will you do to help families find childcare services? Please provide specific examples. Michael Lee.
Well, as the MLA for Vancouver-Langara, I talked to many constituents about the challenge of finding access to childcare. It is a real challenge. I know that in speaking with some nurses, when they're making the hard decision, they're under the moral burden of this pandemic, but in not finding the appropriate childcare that they need, they're having to make the hard decisions about their job futures. And we know that as we go forward here, with the consensus that is building around the country for the necessary resources to be invested in childcare, it's not just about government, though. It needs to be done in partnership. We need to recognize that it's interconnected to the housing supply issues that we talked about earlier this evening, but also in terms of how do we continue to ensure, and we partner with the organizations like the YMCA. I used to be on the Community Foundation Board of the YMCA, and it's the largest provider of childcare in this province. We need to have a government that doesn't over-regulate the space to make it so hard on private care operators they can't continue forward.
Thank you. Ellis Ross.
Thank you. And you know what? Public daycare has been promised in Canada since 1993. It's a politician's promise. And that's the difference with me. I'm not a politician. I'm a leader. I demand results. I look for the results. And I look for the key people to be around me to actually achieve those results, because that's what leadership is. It's teamwork. It's collaboration. My own daughter pays $900 a month in childcare costs, and that's after a subsidy. She truly believed the slogan of $10 a day daycare. She truly believed that. Now she's kind of bitter because it's never been delivered. I had to break it to her. This is what the politicians do. That's what they do to get votes. That's what I do not do. I've never done it before. I'm not going to start now. What we really have to do is we have to leverage the public sector and the private sector to address this problem. You can't squeeze out the private sector. At the end of the day, what we've got to do is we've got to provide more spaces, which is possible. And we have to attract more people to take on childcare as a career choice and actually provide those good wages.
Thank you. Kevin Falcon.
Good for you, Ellis, because he's exactly right. We need to actually have people that have a track record of getting big things done. I'm fed up, frankly, with politicians that promise this, promise that, talk about all this stuff, and frankly, rarely ever deliver, and have no track record of ever delivering. I'll tell you what I'd do. $10 a day daycare, for sure. We've already got the feds in saying they'll fund half the cost. That's a great bargain for British Columbia. But let's make sure it is targeted to those that need it most. Secondly, let's make sure our early childhood educators are paid more, because we want to attract the best and the most capable to look after our kids, and that's an important part of it. And the third, get rid of the red tape. This NDP government will make this a unionized, slow, cumbersome, impossible to navigate system. That's why they've accomplished nothing in 4 years. We'll get it done working with the private sector, not-for-profits, and government if necessary to get those seats and spaces in place.
Thank you. Renee Merrifield.
Well, there are 220,000 children aged 1 to 5 in BC, and there are approximately 110,000 daycare spaces. We require an additional 50,000 today. The NDP have only added, on average, over the course of the last 4 years, 1,575. They aren't even beginning to keep up with the need for spaces. As a working mom, I understand how devastating it is for families who cannot find childcare when they desperately need it. So I'm serious about this issue. The money needs to follow the child, with more given to those in need and more to those in higher cost areas. This is about supply and affordability, so having less bureaucracy, less red tape, and a more pragmatic approach will help deliver more spaces. Having good, affordable childcare supports our children and our families and our parents, but it also supports BC's gender equality, our labor force, and our future. It's time we fix it once and for all.
Thank you. Val Litwin.
Governments that don't put childcare at the top of their list aren't serious about long-term community health and prosperity for kids. Getting care for kids is hard. We're going through this right now. It takes time and it costs money. But childcare is about enabling choice, not just great care for kids, but enabling choice for parents and communities, for everyone. I'm in that stage of life right now. I'm building a family. I'm starting a new career. It's complicated and hard. But this is about the children, not parents. Sometimes people want to fight a good idea because it wasn't their idea. But I agree with some of the other candidates on this stage. $10 a day daycare is a good idea, but I think it should be for everyone. Ironically, money might be the easy part here, loose quotations. The hard part is going to be trained staff, facilities, and easing up on the licensing requirements so we can get this over the line, and that's where I'm going to focus my policy work.
Thank you.
Yes.
Renee Merrifield, you have chosen to use your challenge card. You have a minute.
Thank you. And my challenge is actually something that Kevin said, and that was that he wanted to pay ECE educators more. So my question is fairly simple, and that is that how would he go about providing for those higher wages while still keeping childcare affordable?
Kevin Falcon, you have a minute.
Oh, great. Well, thank you, Renee. I think it's a great question. I think one of the ways you do that is you make sure you work with the people in the system. One of the challenges this government has is they do not speak to anybody who's actually currently working in the system, particularly if they're from a not-for-profit or a private sector daycare, because they have a bias against them. And they just have simply one answer, as the NDP always do. Let's just figure out how we can make a nice big government bureaucracy that's going to be real inefficient and it's not going to achieve the needs that the public really wants. Renee, you said it best. There is a huge shortage of daycare spaces that we need today, not 10 years from now. They've had 4 years and delivered nothing. I want to make sure that we deliver spaces and we deliver it fast. And the way that happens is by making sure you've got the right pay scales in place for those that we want to deliver it, and that we work with the private sector and the not-for-profit sector and government spaces where it makes sense to deliver those spaces and deliver them quickly.
Thank you. Ellis, we'll get to you. I'd like Gavin to answer the question first, if that's okay.
Okay.
Gavin.
Thank you. As the only person on this stage with actual experience in the childcare sector, I can say this. Childcare is not just a social service, it's an economic enabler. We also need to talk not only about childcare affordability, but also about choice and respecting the choices that parents want to have. Now, what I would do to address childcare is exactly the opposite of what John Horgan is doing. I've spoken with a large number of childcare operators, and they feel they are under assault by John Horgan and the NDP. The NDP is squeezing the life out of an industry that is 95% women entrepreneurs, and those private sector providers have provided 90% of the new spaces. This NDP government will not stop until there is a government-run, union-dominated, one-size-fits-all solution that doesn't actually fit anyone. As one operator put it to me, it's going to be a new fast ferries. We have to start pushing back and pushing back hard and defending childcare operators.
Thank you. Ellis Ross, you have your challenge card.
Challenge card for Val. Not necessarily a challenge, but a clarification. Money is probably not going to be the easy part if you're talking about government money, because both levels of government have historic deficits, and those deficits have to be paid off through debt. The interest payments alone are going to cost taxpayers of BC millions, if not billions of dollars. So the money might not be there. The only thing we're actually really hoping for is maybe the federal government commits on their political promise to provide this money to BC. There has been no talk of this NDP government for the economy to be matched with this deficit they're incurring. And this is the difference between politics and leadership. Every First Nation leader in BC, if not Canada, has fiscal responsibility forced down their throat with punishments. No rewards, just punishments. And this is what we've got to get back to. If we want to see these services like childcare, if we want to see more infrastructure, we've got to get back to this, and we're going to have to address that deficit. Because quite frankly, my kids and grandkids are going to have to address it if we don't.
Thank you. Val Litwin, you have a minute to respond.
Ellis, I'm with you, man. That's why I put it in loose quotation marks. Look, here's the issue. We've got a commitment from the federal government for these funds for $10 a day daycare. That's great. But it won't do anything if we don't have trained staff and facilities and licensing requirements that allow us to put that money somewhere. So what I'm saying is, we've got the money. In theory, that's terrific. But we actually have to focus on the real problem, and my friend to my left knows all about this. Again, if we don't have good people that are willing to step into the breach and staff these facilities and care for our kids, we got nothing. If we don't have enough facilities because they can't get it over the line because of licensing requirements and too much red tape, we're toast. So I'm with you, Ellis. I agree. Let's not make politicians promises, but we have to understand the money might be there, but it won't do anything if we don't have the pieces to make it happen.
Thank you. Michael Lee, you have a challenge card.
Thank you, Maz. I represent a riding in South Vancouver that has a lot of childcare needs. And one of the oldest childcare providers, when I met with them, has a real concern, as many of the candidates here are talking about, in terms of early childhood education and how do we continue to train and recruit those educators and attract them and retain them in terms of the wage level. But my question is to Kevin. In terms of your 5-point plan, as you've alluded to, the federal government has put those promises out there. They're implementing $10 a day childcare. What sort of level of consultation have you done in order to set the targets in your plan? Is this a real top-down type policy, or have you gone out and actually worked with childcare providers to ask about their assessments in terms of what's needed as we go forward in this province?
Kevin Falcon, you have a minute to respond.
Sure. Well, this is where my experience in dealing with the federal government, I think, comes into play, because I'll tell you this, it is rare that the federal government actually comes up with money on a sustained basis. What they typically do is say, here, we'll provide you some money for 2 or 3 years, and then it ends, and we get stuck with a very expensive program. So the key is to make sure that, and we're going to have to negotiate with the federal government on the principles and the details around $10 a day, but it's the principle that matters. The fact of the matter is right now, if you're a young single mom in Surrey with a couple of kids, that you need to get those kids into daycare because you want to get back into the workforce, that is a choice that you're willing to make, they ought to have affordable, effective daycare. And no, I'm not going to spend, like typical politicians, the next 10 years talking and having more consultations. We've had lots of consultations about daycare providers, by the way, and about getting more effective daycare. We've now got an opportunity to deliver, and I want to make sure we do, and I also want to make sure that those multi-generational families, that doesn't work for them, that we also have a tax credit to recognize the commitment they're making in their homes in the South Asian community and the Chinese community.
Thank you. Gavin Du.
Thank you.
Second challenge card.
Kevin, I liked your childcare plan. I liked it a lot more when I put it out 4 months ago. Listen, you've talked about streamlining permitting processes. You've talked about eliminating red tape. Could you talk specifically about exactly what you will do in that regard?
1 minute.
Sure. The first thing comes down to how government approaches this. You should know that in a previous role, I was the minister responsible for deregulation and cutting red tape. We made a commitment to cut it by 1/3 in our first 3 years. We exceeded that target with 42%. I'm very proud of that. Same goes for every industry. What the NDP is going to do is exactly what Val and you said earlier, which is have a one-size-fits-all big government approach to how they're going to try and solve daycare. It will be inefficient. It will take decades to deliver, and nobody that currently has kids in the system right now will get any benefit. So the way we move faster is consult, first of all, with the folks that are in the system now, the 95%, as you correctly point out, women that are running these daycare centers, to make sure that we design this program to work for them. That's exactly what I would do, and make sure that we eliminate the kind of red tape that's getting in the way of delivering great services for families.
Thank you. Michael Lee, you have your last challenge card.
Well, I think this has been a great discussion about childcare and the importance of it in terms of access and affordability, and how do we put together a better system for this province and so many British Columbians that need it, and recognizing the importance of choice as well. But my point, Kevin, is really this. This leadership race and how we rebuild trust with our party is not just about throwing down flags or numbers or targets that have no basis on anything. This is about how do we engage with British Columbians to know what matters to them. We're not going to stand up on this stage just putting out there promises that we can't actually meet. So my question to you was really, what is your plan grounded on? What analysis have you done in terms of your 5-point plan?
Sure. Well, for one thing, I've looked to see where it's worked elsewhere. I think one of the great models you can look at is what happened in Quebec. And to just echo something someone said earlier, we shouldn't look at this as a social program. It's actually an economic development initiative, because anytime you give young working women and men the opportunity to get back into the workforce, that's good for the economy, and that's good for their kids if they make that decision. And what they found in Quebec with their $10 a day daycare program was the incremental GDP that was realized by having working women and men back into the workforce more than paid for the cost of the program. To me, that's sensible politics. That's smart economics, and that works for families. So look, I don't take a whole bunch of time having to have endless discussions about a subject that we've all been talking about and hearing about for decades. It's about getting on with it. The federal government came to the table. They've prepared to fund 50% of the cost of $10 a day daycare. I say let's get it on, let's get it done, and let's get families getting the daycare spaces they deserve. That's called decision making. That's called leadership.
Thank you. Now we're on to closing remarks, starting with Gavin Du.
Well, that was not boring, folks. Look, a competitive debate shows that our party is worth fighting for. It's time to choose both a committed new leader and a renewed sense of who we are at our core. We are not the party of big government. We all know that. But we can't just be the party of big business and big money and of those who have already succeeded. We need to restore the promise of BC for the underdogs, for people and families and small businesses who are still striving and struggling to build a better life for their children and grandchildren, for their parents and grandparents. There is only one choice before us. We can cling to the old ways and the baggage of the past and lose again, or we can move forward together and win. That's why I'm running, And that's why I'm asking for your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Val Litwin.
As CEO of the BC Chamber, my team and I work to elevate all regions of BC and all sectors of the economy. But in the 4 years when I was CEO, you know what happened? Our business members and communities began to embrace social, environmental, and Indigenous issues with a new vigor and optimism, and I helped them download the new operating system. The people of this province now see that their social and economic issues are all connected. Strong economies, inclusive communities, a healthy environment. These worlds don't exist in silos anymore, so let's stop treating them as if they do. Do you know what makes our party special? We are the only ones that can write the code for prosperity, the driver of everything else. We can become Canada's first fiscally responsible and socially conscious party. If we get that formula right in 2024, we will win. The NDP isn't our enemy. The old operating system is our enemy. Let's embrace what comes next. I'm Val Litwin. Join my team.
Thank you. Renee Merrifield.
As a businesswoman, I know that we need to reinvigorate the economy and marry that with our protection of the environment. And I can see the business case for healthcare and childcare and making it great. As a mother, I can see that we need to inspire the next generation's dreams once more, because there's a huge connect in between what they believe is possible and what truly is and can be possible. And as a compassionate person, I see that we need to solve the crises in our communities and bring back dignity. There are obstacles to overcome in getting there. But between obstacle and opportunity, there is a bridge. And I am a tenacious and committed builder of bridges, and I am passionate about the future of BC. Because this isn't about me, it's about us. We have an opportunity to win in 2024, but it's going to take more than just great ideas. It's going to take leadership. Together, we can build better belonging. Thank you.
Thank you. Kevin Falcon.
Look, our party needs to be a big tent. I often talk about this. What is a big tent? A big tent means that we want you to belong and feel welcomed in this party if you share our values and principles, that a private sector-driven economy is the best way to generate revenue so that we can fund first-class public services. Regardless of your race, regardless of your religion, regardless of your sexual orientation, we want you to be embraced and welcomed by this party, and you will be under Kevin Falcon leadership. But the other thing that's important is principles, principled leadership. We need leadership that has the experience to actually get things done. People can talk about leadership, but it's actually having the experience of knowing how you, for example, win in the Lower Mainland, where we have to win back seats, like my old seat of Surrey-Cloverdale that I used to win by some of the biggest margins. But I also want to say this. We have 6 great candidates. If you support any one of them, even other than me, support the heck out of them. Because the more you can help our party, the more we can all build together, the better we'll be and the stronger we'll be as a party. That's how we're going to win. That's how we'll form government.
Thank you. Ellis Ross.
Well, you know, my past success with my community and region is based on listening to grassroots. And why we were successful? Because I am grassroots. I'm no elitist. I'm no millionaire. Even as a chief counselor, I was earning less than some of the people that were working in LG. And I worked hard for those jobs because I truly believe in people. I believe in people of British Columbia. We have to uplift them. We have to give them better wages so they can afford those mortgages and they can actually compete in today's day and age to fight inflation, the cost of living. And when I talk about change, I'm talking about change that I actually did before for myself. But I'm also talking about what is it going to take to beat the NDP in 2024? It can't be just a name change. I beat the NDP in my own riding in 2017, 2020, and I can do it again because BC is changing. It's changing fast. The criticism of Tri-Cities, Richmond, my own daughter, are saying that we stop listening. Well, that's what I do best. I listen, and then I act on it. And that's the difference between leadership and politics.
Thank you. Michael Lee.
Our party is at a real crossroads. We need to choose the right person at the right time to lead our party now with today's solutions for today's challenges. The core question of this leadership race is whether quick fixes like 5-point plans will get us where we need to go, or whether we will need to rebuild our foundation. We need to restore trust and accountability and rebuild from the ground up to win the next election, especially in the Lower Mainland. We will not be able to create change with new policies alone. if we don't have that foundation of trust, because everything stems from trust. If we don't have trust with people, they won't listen to us and hear our great policies. They won't join our team, become members, run as candidates, or vote for us without real change. I'm the candidate to get this done. Join my effort to bring a different kind of politics to BC, one with clear values, integrity, and a commitment to restoring trust. We can get this done together.
Thank you. That's a wrap, folks. Thank you to each of the candidates, and thank you for joining us this evening for our first debates. A friendly reminder that in order to vote in this leadership race, you must be a member of the BC Liberal Party by December 17th at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. The leadership race will conclude on February 5th, 2022. If you are not a member of the party, you can join online at www.bcliberals.com. Thank you, and have a great evening.
Thanks, Maz.